pregnant K9 German Shepherd was tied up to suffer in the desert. What happened next will touch your heart. She was a pregnant K9 German Shepherd, abandoned, dehydrated, and tied to a post in the middle of the unforgiving desert. No shade, no food, no chance of survival. Whoever left her there thought no one would care. But then a miracle happened. What a young wildlife ranger did next will restore your faith in humanity and reveal the unbreakable courage of a mother willing to fight for more than just herself. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. It helps us bring you more inspiring stories like this one. The desert didn't forgive. It stretched endlessly across southern Arizona like a furnace. Bleached rock, rust-colored dust, and wind that howled as if carrying the ghosts of everything left behind. In this dry wasteland, the sun didn't rise. It punished. And on one of those punishing mornings, a Park Service drone picked up something strange. A heat signature, moving slightly, then collapsing. It was off the marked trail, in a patch of broken terrain, known only by a few locals as Coyote Hollow. People didn't go there. Animals barely did. But Ranger Eli Mercer did. 29 years old, third-generation wildlife tracker, and a man who believed no signal should be ignored, especially not in the middle of nowhere. He packed water, a sat phone, and some emergency medical supplies, then headed out in his Jeep, tires chewing up sand as the temperature climbed above 100 degrees. He thought it might be a dying animal, maybe a lost goat or a desert fox. He wasn't prepared for what he found. There, tied to a rusted fence post, was a German Shepherd. She wasn't just injured, she was pregnant. Her coat was caked in dirt, ribs showing through her belly like the spines of a buried ship. Her breathing was shallow. Her eyes, one a deep brown, the other clouded with old injury, watched Eli with no energy left to fear him. Her legs trembled when she tried to shift, and her belly moved. Eli stopped, stunned. Jesus! The rope around her neck had cut into her skin, crusted with blood and sand. Her back paws were raw, and yet there was no growl, no bark, no resistance. Just surrender. He dropped to his knees. "Hey, girl," he whispered. "I got you." He pulled out his knife, slicing the rope carefully, then gently poured water into his cupped hand. She tried to drink, but her tongue was too dry. So Eli let the water dribble slowly over her muzzle. She closed her eyes. For the first time in who knows how long, someone was touching her to help. "I don't know who did this to you," Eli murmured, "but you're not alone anymore." He checked her abdomen, swollen, warm. She was close to giving birth, maybe hours away. Transporting her would be dangerous, but leaving her out here? Unthinkable. He opened the back of the Jeep, spread out a blanket, and lifted her slowly. She didn't resist, but a soft whine escaped her lips as her body curled protectively around her belly. He drove carefully, one hand on the wheel, one glancing back constantly. She lay still, her eyes locked with his in the mirror. There was something human in them, something pleading. Not save me, but save them. Eli didn't take her to a vet. He took her home. His cabin sat on the edge of the Sonoran Preserve, modest, wooden, open to the wild. It wasn't designed for veterinary care, but it was quiet, shaded, and safe. He cleaned her wounds, rubbed her ears with wet cloths, and left food and water near her bed. But she didn't eat. She barely moved. She just stared, sometimes at him, sometimes at the window, and sometimes at nothing. He tried different names. Hope, Luna, Lady. None felt right. Then he saw the tiny tattoo inside her ear. Faded but clear enough. K9-723. She had been trained and abandoned. A working dog. Possibly military, maybe police, left behind in the cruelest way. Eli's stomach turned. "You weren't just left," he muttered. "You were discarded." That night, as the temperature dropped and the coyotes howled outside the fences, Eli placed a pillow next to her bed and lay down on the floor. He didn't touch her, just stayed near, listened to her breathe, felt her tremble. And somewhere before dawn, as the stars faded and the desert cooled, she inched forward and placed her paw on his forearm. No bark, no growl, just a quiet, I see you. And that's when he gave her a name. Grace, he whispered, because you're still here. And that takes more grace than I've ever known. The next morning, the first contraction hit. Eli was asleep on the floor when he heard it. A sharp breath, followed by a low, guttural whine. He sat up, eyes wide. Grace's body was tense. Her back legs kicked. "Oh, no," he whispered, grabbing his phone and flashlight. The first pup came fast. A tiny bundle of fur, slick and silent. Eli held his breath. Then movement. A twitch. A gasp. He laughed out loud, tears stinging his eyes. "You did it, girl." Over the next 2 hours, Grace gave birth to 5 puppies. 3 males, 2 females, each one small, shaking, eyes sealed shut from the world that had nearly taken them before their first breath. But Grace, she didn't flinch. She cleaned them, nuzzled them, protected them like she'd done it 100 times before. Eli sat beside her, holding water, wiping her head, whispering encouragements like a father in a delivery room. "You're not just strong," he whispered. "You're a miracle." By dawn, all 5 were nursing, snuggled tightly against her belly. Eli made a fresh pot of coffee, stepped outside, and looked out over the vast desert, the same desert that had nearly swallowed them, now had witnessed rebirth. But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning, because if Grace was a former K-9 unit, someone had left her out there intentionally, and he had a feeling they weren't done with her yet. Grace didn't sleep much after birth, even as her 5 newborn pups squirmed and nestled against her. Even as Eli tried to keep the room dark and quiet, the K-9 German Shepherd kept her eyes open, one of them cloudy, the other razor sharp. She flinched at shadows, growled low at certain sounds. Every time Eli entered the room, she tracked his steps with military precision, until she caught his scent, remembered his voice, and allowed her head to rest again. Eli knew the signs. Grace wasn't just recovering. She was surviving. Every breath she took still came from a place of hypervigilance, and he couldn't blame her. Whatever she had endured before he found her in the desert had trained her to stay alert, even while bleeding, even while broken. But what haunted him more were the things she didn't do. She never barked, never wagged her tail. She didn't lick his hand. She didn't look away. Only soldiers and survivors stare like that, with the hollow patience of someone who didn't expect anything good to last. By the 3rd day, Eli began to dig. He sent photos of the tattoo in Grace's ear to a retired military vet friend in Tucson, cross-referenced it with known K-9 registries, called a few animal shelters quietly, asking about any recent records of discarded dogs matching her description. And then a hit, K-9-723, registered in New Mexico, originally trained by a private contractor for Border Patrol work. No adoption record, marked as retired due to pregnancy, then mysteriously removed from facility without formal release. The file ended there, but there was one name listed in the original training log, Sergeant Wyatt Briggs. Eli froze when he saw the name. Briggs had a reputation, a former handler known for his results and for crossing lines. He'd been under internal review 3 times. Never charged, never stripped of rank, but he disappeared from the system 2 months ago, the same time Grace was taken off record. Eli sat at the kitchen table, the sunrise casting orange streaks across his cabin wall. If Briggs dumped Grace in the desert, it wasn't because she'd failed him. It was because she no longer served him. She'd become a liability. A pregnant working dog wasn't profitable. She needed care, time, protection, and men like Briggs didn't know what to do with something they couldn't control. Eli stared at his coffee, then at the pups huddled together on their blanket, completely unaware of the world waiting outside the cabin door. "Not this time," he muttered. "No one's taking you again." Later that morning, Eli drove into town. He picked up more food, veterinary vitamins, and a security camera system for cabin. His gut told him not to overreact, but something gnawed at him. Grace's abandonment hadn't been accidental, and no one drops a trained K-9 that deep into the desert unless they're trying to make sure she never comes back. When he returned home, Grace met him at the door, still weak but standing. Her ears were up, her body between the pups and the entrance. Eli knelt. "Hey, Easy, it's me." She didn't growl, but she didn't move either. He placed the bags on the floor and slowly reached out his hand. After a moment, she took one step back, allowing him to pass. Small progress. He fed her by hand that evening. Chicken breast boiled in water, small bits at a time. She took them gently. No snapping, no panic. But when he touched her collar, the old one, still embedded with scratches and dried blood, she flinched so hard she almost fell. Eli backed off immediately. "Okay, not yet." He understood. Some scars don't bleed. They wait. And hers were deep. That night, after setting up the cameras, Eli sat on the porch and opened his old notebook. He scribbled down details, dates, patterns, behavior. He had once trained wild mustangs. He knew trauma. He knew how to build trust in stages. With Grace, it would take more than time. It would take truth. He flipped the page and started a new entry. Grace, day 5. Still hyper alert. Eats only when pups are close. Won't sleep unless door is locked. Still won't let me remove collar. He paused, tapping the pen against his chin. Then something moved. A soft alert blinked on the corner of his phone. Motion detected. East perimeter. Eli froze. He checked the feed. A vehicle, a dark-colored pickup truck, parked on the dirt road just outside the fence line. The headlights were off. The engine silent. But the door opened. A figure stepped out. Male. Stocky. Baseball cap pulled low. He walked halfway to the gate. Stood there, watching the cabin. Didn't move. Didn't knock. Just watched. Eli stood slowly, heart racing. He slipped inside, locked the door, and checked on Grace. She was already standing, growling now, low and guttural. And for the first time, Eli saw it. Not fear. Recognition. She knew who it was. And she was ready to protect her babies, even if it meant dying. Eli picked up the rifle from the back room, not to shoot, but to make something very clear if needed. The man never approached. After 10 long minutes, he turned back toward the truck, drove off without headlights. Eli watched the taillights disappear into the dark. He looked down at Grace, who had positioned herself between the pups and the door again, her breathing heavy, every muscle trembling. He knelt beside her. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're not property anymore." She looked up at him, unsure, then licked his hand, once. And that was enough, because for the first time since she collapsed in the desert, she wasn't just surviving. She was beginning to believe. The sun hadn't yet broken the horizon when Eli opened the front door, steaming coffee in hand. The desert stretched silent and golden like a sleeping giant. But inside the cabin, something had changed. Grace was standing. Not just standing, waiting. Her head turned as he stepped out onto the porch, tail lowered but wagging, just once. A slow, uncertain gesture, like she was testing it after years of not knowing if it worked. Eli paused in the doorway, almost afraid to breathe. "Hey, Grace," he said gently. She trotted to him, not limping, not dragging herself like before. And when she reached him, she pressed her head into his thigh. Her tail moved again, twice. It wasn't celebration. It was recognition. Eli smiled and ran his fingers softly behind her ear. "Good morning, Mama." The pups were growing fast. Their eyes had opened just the day before. Clumsy and wobbly, they had begun exploring short distances from their mother's side, yipping and rolling into each other on the living room rug. But Grace never let them out of view. Even now, her ears flicked toward every sound in the cabin. Still, she had stepped away to greet him. It was a turning point. A quiet one, but monumental. That afternoon, Eli prepared something he'd avoided for days. The bath. Not for the pups. They could wait, but for Grace. Her fur was matted, patches of dry blood still clinging to her chest and haunches. She needed healing skin, not just food and calm. He set a shallow tub outside, filled it with warm water, laid out towels and soft soap. He approached her slowly, kneeling in front of her. "Grace," he said, holding the scissors gently. "I want to take the collar off now. You don't need it anymore." She stood still. Her breathing quickened, but she didn't back away. Eli reached under her chin, carefully sliding the blade beneath the fabric. With one clean snip, the collar fell. It was thick, military grade, the kind used on bomb detection dogs and patrol units. The metal tag read, "Property of Federal Security, Contracting Group." Eli turned it in his hand. The inside was crusted with dried blood. Grace licked her lips nervously. Eli dropped the collar into a metal bucket, far from where she could see it again. Then he ran warm water over her. She flinched only once. He lathered the soap gently through her fur, whispering soft words, not instructions, not command, but things like "you're safe" and "good girl" and "you're doing amazing." When he rinsed her off and dried her, Grace pressed her head into his shoulder, letting out the softest exhale. Not pain, not fear, relief. By sunset, Grace had curled herself in the corner near the pups, cleaner, calmer, and lighter, as if the removal of the collar had done more than free her neck. It had begun to free something deeper. That's when the knock came. Eli stiffened. No one knocked here. The cabin was 4 miles from the nearest paved road, tucked between state-protected land and miles of dry forest. He looked through the peephole. A man stood on the porch. Tall, tan, sunglasses on even in the fading light. He held a clipboard. Eli opened the door a crack, keeping one hand on the inside latch. "Can I help you?" "Afternoon," the man said, voice rehearsed. "I'm with FS Group. We're searching for one of our retired units. She went missing after a relocation error. Tracking chip went dark. May have wandered into this area. Her name is Delta." Eli's jaw clenched. "Don't know any dog named Delta," he replied flatly. "She's a working shepherd." The man continued. "Pregnant. Probably injured. We have photos if needed." Eli opened the door wider, but only slightly. "Funny. Sounds like a dog someone dumped." The man's smile didn't move. "Maybe, but she's company property until the legal transfer is complete. We've been asked to retrieve her. Gently, of course." Eli stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind him. "She's not here." The man tilted his head. "You sure?" "I'm sure." "Mind if I look around?" "I do, actually." A pause. The wind shifted. The man's jaw tightened. "Listen, I get it. You find a stray, you feel something. But this dog has military value. Her pups do too. Our contract holds ownership until full release is approved by Central Command." "She's not a contract," Eli snapped. "She's a mother, and she almost died because someone left her to rot in the desert." The man's voice turned colder. "Legally, we still have claim. If you interfere, that's possession of company assets." Eli stepped closer. "Then go get your lawyers." The man stared for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Eli didn't blink. "No, I'm making it human." The man walked back to his truck, muttering something into a Bluetooth mic. Eli watched him go, heart hammering. When he turned around, Grace was at the window. She'd seen him, and her eyes were calm, because she hadn't run, and neither had he. That night, Eli didn't sleep. He rechecked the cameras, set new passwords, hid the pup's crate in a closet lined with blankets. He made calls, quiet ones, to people he trusted, a lawyer, a retired sheriff, and a local journalist who owed him a favor. By morning, the story had changed. The woman from the paper published a piece titled, "Pregnant Working Dog Found Abandoned in Desert, Rescued and Protected by Local Ranger." The photo showed Grace curled around her pups, safe and warm. Eli didn't use her original name. He didn't have to, because the world didn't need to see her past. It needed to see what she was becoming. And somewhere deep in the cabin, Grace rested with one paw over her smallest pup, her body still scarred, her eyes still clouded, her soul still healing. But she slept, not because she was no longer afraid, but because now she believed someone else would stand guard. For once, she didn't have to be the soldier. She could simply be a mother. The story went viral within 48 hours. By the end of the week, over 2 million people had watched the video posted by the local journalist. A former K9 German shepherd, pregnant, emaciated, and left to die in the Arizona desert, rescued by a quiet wildlife ranger with nothing but grit and a cabin full of heart. The video didn't show Eli's face. It showed hers. Grace, curled protectively around her 5 pups. Grace, being bathed by careful hands. Grace, walking with cautious steps but a lifted head. People cried. People donated. People cared. And just as quickly, FS Group retaliated. 3 days later, a letter arrived by courier. Cease and desist. Immediate surrender of proprietary working asset K9-723, designation, Delta. Failure to comply will result in federal litigation, seizure, and possible criminal charges under the Commercial Canine Use Act Section 12B. Eli read it in silence, fingers tightening around the page. The words felt mechanical, lifeless, like the dog in question was nothing more than a drone gone rogue. He folded the letter slowly and placed it in the drawer beside his hunting knife. Then he turned to Grace. She stood by the pups, watching him. Her ears were low. She knew something was wrong. Eli knelt beside her. "They're not taking you," he whispered. She nudged his chest softly with her nose, just once, as if to say, "I know." The next day, Eli drove into town and walked into the sheriff's office. Sheriff Dean was a grizzled, fair man in his 60s, known for siding with ranchers and locals before corporations. He read the letter, sighed, and leaned back in his chair. "They're serious," he muttered. "That statute give them teeth. Technically, under 12B, she's company property until they log her as released. No adoption process. No surrender form. Just a race. She was supposed to disappear." Eli said coldly, "That's why they left her where no one would find her. And now you've made her visible." Eli nodded. "I'm not sorry." Dean scratched his beard. "They'll press hard. Lawyers, court orders. They'll say she's bred from federal investment, trained under defense budgets, that those pups are state assets. They're children. They don't care." Eli stood. "Then we make them care." By nightfall, hashtag Let Grace Stay was trending. Photos of her pups, now growing stronger and bolder, were being shared across Facebook and Twitter. A small team of volunteers, local vets, activists, and ranch hands began organizing behind the scenes. But then came the court order, delivered by a U.S. Marshal. Federal property retrieval, authorized entry, scheduled for 10 a.m. Friday. Eli read it twice, then locked the cabin doors. Friday morning came with a storm, not in the sky, but in the soul. Clouds rolled across the desert, low and gray, wind hissing through the brush like a warning. Eli stood at the front porch, Grace beside him, her pups hidden safely in the back room. His rifle hung on the wall, not for use, just memory. A black SUV pulled up. 3 men stepped out, 2 in suits, 1 in uniform with a badge reading Federal Animal Asset Recovery. Eli stepped down from the porch. "Turn around," the taller one ordered. "We're here for the dog." Eli crossed his arms. "She's not going anywhere." The second man pulled out a paper. "This is a federal order, signed and sealed. She's a trained K9 still under jurisdiction." "No," she was discarded. "That doesn't nullify the contract." Eli's jaw tensed. "She's a living being, not a barcode. We're not here to debate morals. Step aside." Grace stood behind him now, growling low. "She has 5 newborns," Eli said. "You take her, they die. That's not our concern." Eli took 1 step forward. "My name's on a land deed. I've got a private legal team already filing an injunction. If you cross that gate, you'll be violating due process." The lead agent hesitated. They weren't expecting resistance with paperwork. The tension hung in the air like smoke. Then a woman appeared, slender, sharp-eyed, with a camera crew behind her. "Excuse me," she said. "Rachel Wu, Channel 9 News. We're doing a live segment on the Grace case. Would you mind telling the viewers why you're attempting to separate a nursing mother from her pups?" The agents froze. The camera light snapped on. The microphones were raised. And Grace sat beside Eli, no longer growling, just watching. A mother ready to defend, but calm, because she knew she wasn't alone. The federal agents left, not because they gave up, but because they knew they had lost the optics. Eli turned to Rachel. "Did you plan that?" She smiled. "No, but I hoped it might go this way." He looked down at Grace. She had walked back to the porch. Quiet, graceful, tired but proud. She curled into space beside the door, watching her pups peek from inside. Eli sat beside her, hand resting on her back. "They'll be back," he said. Grace leaned against him slightly. But this time, he could feel it in her body. Something was different. She wasn't trembling. She was ready. That night, Eli posted something on his social media account. It was simple, just a photo. Grace in the middle of the cabin floor, all 5 pups asleep on top of her, like warm, living armor. The caption read, "They called her property. But she's proof that love cannot be owned. She's not leaving. Not today. Not ever." Eli, it was shared over 8 million times by sunrise. People donated. People rallied. People wrote letters to lawmakers. And Grace remained calm. She had been tied to a fence in the middle of the desert to die. But now she was surrounded by something stronger than any chain. Witnesses. And one man who had chosen to see her not as a tool, but as a soul. The desert bloomed, not with flowers, but with voices. Within days of Eli's post going viral, major news networks picked up the story. CNN, NPR, even BBC World ran features with headlines like, "K9 mom left to die, now symbol of hope. Ranger resists federal seizure of German Shepherd and her pups." From combat tool to family, the story of Grace. Celebrities posted about it. Animal welfare groups mobilized. A former Marine tweeted, "I serve with dogs like Grace. We didn't leave our brothers behind, and we sure don't abandon our mothers." Overnight, Grace became more than a dog. She became a symbol of resilience, of motherhood, of reclaiming what it means to be alive. But with attention came strategy. FS Group wasn't going to fight this in the press. They switched tactics. On Monday morning, a box arrived at Eli's cabin. Inside was a plush dog bed, a silver name tag engraved Delta, and a letter. It read, "Mr. Mercer, we recognize the emotional investment you've made in K9-723. Rather than pursue retrieval, our company proposes a partnership. We are prepared to offer full legal transfer of ownership and a donation of $25,000 toward Grace's veterinary care, contingent upon the removal of all defamatory content regarding FS Group from your public profiles, a signed NDA non-disclosure agreement regarding any training records, mistreatment allegations, or internal reports, a collaborative video expressing mutual resolution and positive care outcome for the animal. Please respond within 72 hours. Eli read it twice. He closed the box, then tossed it into the fire pit behind the barn. The corporate pivot wasn't mercy. It was containment. They wanted the story to disappear beneath a polished narrative. Everything worked out. Everyone agreed. Let's move on. But he couldn't move on. Not until people knew the truth. Not until this never happened to another dog like Grace again. That night, he posted a new update. Today they offered money to quiet her story. I burned it because Grace doesn't need a sponsor. She needs justice. As the fire in the pit crackled, Grace stood on the porch. She watched the flames, her ears relaxed, her body calm. And then, slowly, she stepped off the porch and walked into the open yard. No leash, no collar, no fence. Eli froze. He watched her walk, step by step, toward the edge of clearing. Her nose lifted to the wind. Her tail flicked side to side. She sniffed the sagebrush, trotted a little farther. Then she stopped, turned around, and looked back. Her face said it all. Am I still allowed to be free? Eli stepped out from the porch, hands open. Go on, girl, he whispered. You earned it. Grace took off, not in fear, not to escape, but in a run that belonged to her. She ran across the yard, around the trees, through the dust trails where wild rabbits used to scatter. Her back legs kicked high, her chest open with breath. She didn't run from anything. She ran into herself, into who she used to be before the chains, before the commands, before the desert. The pups watched from the doorway, yipping with curiosity. Eli laughed softly. "She's showing you the world, little ones." He watched her circle back, tongue out, panting, ears perked. She had never looked more alive. By the end of the week, things accelerated again. A federal hearing was announced, not to seize Grace, but to investigate FS Group's use and disposal of trained canines. Grace's story had become too big, too human. To ignore her now would be to admit that something had always been wrong. Eli received a formal subpoena. He would testify in Washington, D.C. in 3 weeks. The cabin suddenly felt very small, and Grace, though calmer, began pacing again, not out of panic, but alertness. She sensed the weight of the world returning. One afternoon, while the pups napped under the oak tree, Eli sat beside her. She lay next to him, head on his boot, breathing slow. He stroked her fur behind the ear, where the old wound had healed into a smooth, pale patch of skin. "I don't know what comes next," he said, "but I'm not doing it without you." Grace blinked, then rested her paw on his leg. It wasn't obedience. It was something more powerful. Agreement. That night, Eli wrote the opening line of the speech he'd delivered to Congress. "I'm not here as an activist. I'm here as a witness." And what I saw wasn't a working dog. It was a mother abandoned. It was loyalty discarded. It was everything we say we value thrown into the sand. The pups stirred beside the fireplace, their little bodies warm and safe. Eli looked over at Grace, now asleep, her body curled gently around them. She didn't sleep like a soldier anymore. She slept like a guardian who finally knew rest. Not because the battle was over, but because she wasn't alone in it. Not anymore. The courtroom was silent, not the kind of silence born from law, but the kind born from breath being held. The kind that happens when something bigger than protocol is about to enter. Eli stood at the front of the chamber, hands clasped together behind the wooden testimony stand. His heart thundered beneath the suit jacket he hated wearing. A C-SPAN camera sat in the corner, broadcasting live. Millions were watching. But Grace wasn't yet in the room. Not until he called for her. The committee chair, an older senator from Vermont with watery eyes and decades of war stories behind him, leaned toward the mic. "You may begin, Mr. Mercer." Eli nodded, clearing his throat. His statement was written, but he didn't read it. He didn't need to. 3 months ago, I found a German shepherd tied to a fence post in the Arizona desert, he began. She was pregnant. She was starving. And she was silent. He looked up at the members of Congress one by one. Someone left her there, not because she had failed, but because she had become inconvenient. Her body no longer fit the mold. Her mission had ended. Her usefulness had expired. So they tried to erase her. He paused. But Grace didn't die. She gave birth to 5 pups, alone, in pain, and in silence. Because no one had ever taught her she was allowed to ask for help. The room was still. Eli stepped away from the podium. "And I want you all to meet her now." He turned to the side door, a soft creak, then the clicking of nails on polished floor. Grace walked in slowly. She wore no collar, no leash, just her body, healed but still marked. Her head was high, her eyes alert, and behind her, 5 pups, trotting in a tight line, tails up, ears flopping. The audience gasped, not because it was a spectacle, but because it was real. Grace stopped beside Eli and sat. The pups lay at her feet, nestled like tiny warriors beneath a queen. He placed a hand on her back. She was registered as federal property. "But I need this room to understand something." He stepped forward again. "Grace is not property. She is not gear. She is not a badge or a tool. She is proof that no uniform gives us the right to abandon a living soul." Eli looked at the chairman. "And if we allow this, if we let dogs like her be erased the moment they no longer serve us, then we're not protecting this country. We're betraying it." The chair leaned forward. "What do you propose, Mr. Mercer?" "I propose a bill, named after her. The Grace Act. A federal mandate requiring full medical, emotional, and transitional care for all K-9 units after retirement, including protection from euthanasia forced breeding, or abandonment. The chamber erupted in murmurs. One congresswoman wiped her cheek. A retired Air Force general stood from a seat in the back. "I second the motion," he said aloud, "and I'll sign it myself." Applause burst through the room. Not the loud kind, the kind that carries meaning. Grace didn't move. She didn't need to. She had arrived. Back in Arizona, things changed fast. News outlets followed the bill's journey through the House and Senate. Social media dubbed Grace the dog who faced Congress. Her pups were named by school children: Valor, Ember, Echo, Sage, and Dusty. One was adopted by a veteran who had lost his leg in combat. Another went to a young girl with severe anxiety. The others remained with Eli, for now. But Grace, she stayed home. And for the first time, it truly was home. Not a kennel, not a cage, not even just a cabin. Home was Eli's porch, where she'd lie in the evening sun, head high, watching her pups tumble over each other in the dirt. It was the sound of him saying, "Good girl," and her believing it. It was a freedom to sleep deeply, without chains, without orders, without needing permission. On the 1-year anniversary of the day he found her, Eli took Grace back to the spot in the desert. The rusted fence post still stood. The rope had long since turned to dust. He opened the door to the Jeep. Grace didn't hesitate. She stepped out and stood on the sand. She sniffed the air, walked to the post. Saturday. But she didn't tremble. She didn't cry. She just looked at it, then looked back at Eli, and walked away. Side by side, they disappeared into the dusk, not as handler and dog, not as rescuer and victim, but as two survivors, both finally free. If this story touched you, remember this. True loyalty can't be trained. True courage doesn't bark. And true love never needs a leash. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share Grace's story with someone who believes that all lives, no matter how wounded, deserve another chance. Because sometimes all it takes to save a life is seeing it.